Hey, I'm Stan. One quick thing before we start. There was a stretch of my life where the entire thing standing between me and disaster, the whole emergency fund, was about $800. And I made decent money. I just never once looked at how that number ranked against anybody else's, so I had no idea if it was normal or a quiet crisis. So a while back, I went and found the real numbers. How much cash people your age actually keep on hand, straight from the Federal Reserve. Not the average. The average is a lie, and I'm going to show you exactly why. The honest middle. Then I held it up next to my own thin little account, and what I found genuinely changed how I felt walking around. Let me show you. It starts, of all places, with a check engine light.
The check engine light came on for Carla on a Tuesday in the school pickup line, with both kids in the back seat. By Wednesday, the mechanic had a number for her, about $600. A sensor, a part, an afternoon of labor. Nothing dramatic. The kind of bill that turns up 4 or 5 times a year and never once asks if this is a good week. Carla did what all of us do. She opened her banking app, thumb hovering over the screen, and looked at the one number that decides whether a $600 Tuesday is an annoyance or an emergency. Her savings balance. And in the half second before the screen loaded, she already felt the answer in her stomach. Because here's what nobody tells you about that number. It isn't really about the $600, it's about the question sitting underneath it. How many Tuesdays like this can I survive in a row before something actually breaks? That's the number we're going to figure out tonight, not your net worth. We did that another day, the house and the retirement account and all of it. Tonight, it's the smaller, scarier, more honest number, the cash. The money sitting in a savings account that you could touch this afternoon without selling anything or asking anyone for a favor. And we're going to find out exactly where yours ranks by age against the real numbers from the Federal Reserve. By the end, you'll know if you're behind, ahead, or, like most people, a lot closer to normal than the fear in your stomach is telling you. Let's start with why this number is different from every other number in your financial life. Your net worth counts everything. The paid-off part of the house, the retirement account, the car. And that's a fine number. But watch what happens when the check engine light comes on. You can't spend a kitchen. You can't send a bedroom to the mechanic. You can't pull $400 out of a 401k on a Wednesday without a penalty standing in the doorway. The emergency fund is the only money that shows up when the bad Tuesday shows up. That's why it gets measured on its own. So picture the same room we always use. Everybody your age lined up in one enormous room. But this time, we're not lining them up by wealth. We're lining them up by cash they could touch this afternoon. Emptiest account pressed against the door on the left. Biggest cushion way over at the far wall. Everybody else spread out in between. Your savings balance decides one thing. Where you're standing in that line. Let's find your spot. We'll start at the floor, with the most famous test in all of personal finance. You've heard it even if you didn't know the source. Could you cover a surprise? $400 expense? A tire, an alignment, one emergency room copay, right now, without borrowing? Here's the real number from the Federal Reserve's own survey of American households. About 63% of adults said yes, they could cover that $400 with cash or with a card they'd pay off that same month. Which means about 37% said no. More than a third of the country cannot absorb a $400 surprise without carrying a balance, borrowing, or selling something. And at the very bottom of that line, about 13%, better than 1 in 8 adults, said they could not pay that $400 by any method at all. Not cash, not a card, not a loan. So, if you can quietly cover a $400 surprise out of your checking account and go back to your day, understand what just happened. You stepped past more than a third of the entire country. Nobody handed you a medal for it, but you're standing further from the door than you thought. Now let's raise the bar one notch, because $400 is a small storm. Let's ask about $1,000. A vet bill and a broken water heater in the same rotten week. More than half of Americans, right around 53%, could not cover a $1,000 emergency straight out of savings. And this is the one that stops people. About 24% of Americans have no emergency savings at all, not a little, zero. Almost a quarter of the country is running with no buffer whatsoever, which means the next surprise doesn't come out of savings. It goes straight onto a card, or it doesn't get paid. So that's the shape of the floor. Most households can take a small hit and not a medium one. The $400 line, they can mostly clear. The $1,000 line is where the room thins out fast. Now, before we place you by age, I have to drag one lie out into the light, because it's the exact reason you might be feeling behind right now when you're not. You've seen the headline. The average American has this much in savings, and the number is always big enough to make your stomach drop. Here's the truth. The average balance in an American checking and savings account is about $62,000. 62 grand. Read that at a dinner table and watch everybody quietly panic. Except it's a lie. The same lie as always. Because the average, the mean, piles everybody's cash into one giant heap and divides by the number of people. And when a handful of very rich households park enormous piles of cash, they poison the whole number. One person sitting on $2 million in cash, standing next to 100 normal families, makes the average family in that room look like they've got tens of thousands sitting around. Nobody actually got richer. The math just got dragged toward the far wall. So we throw the average out and we use the honest number, the median. The person standing in the exact middle of the room, half the country behind them, half ahead. And the median American cash balance, the real middle, is about $8,000. Sit with that gap for a second. The average says 62,000. The middle says 8,000. The average is nearly 8 times bigger than where a normal household actually lives. That entire gap is not savings. It's distortion. It's the far wall bleeding into a number that was supposed to describe you. Remember that word. Median. Every time you see a headline about the average savings account, somebody is quietly standing you next to a millionaire and letting you feel poor about it. So now let's line the room up by age, using the honest middle, and let's find your spot. And I want you to reveal these to yourself one at a time. If you're under 35, the middle of your room keeps about $5,400 in cash. That's it. So if you're 29 with a few $1,000s in savings and you've been quietly ashamed of it, you are standing dead center of everyone your age. Half of them have less. Nobody told you that because nobody says their savings balance out loud. Take one step forward, 35 to 44. The middle holds about $7,500. Barely moved. If you're 40 with 7 or 8 grand in the account and 2 kids eating your paycheck, you are exactly where the middle of the room stands. Step forward again. 45 to 54. The middle sits at about $8,700. This is supposed to be peak earning, and still, the cash cushion has crawled up by a couple $1,000s in 20 years. That's not a personal failure. That's the whole room. Life keeps spending the cushion faster than people can build it. Keep walking. 55 to 64, the middle actually dips a little to about $8,000. The last of the kids, the house, the helping out, it all pulls at the same account. And then something finally changes. 65 to 74, the middle climbs to about $13,400. That's the peak. The highest the cash cushion ever gets at any age for the middle of the country. And then it eases back. 75 and older, about $10,000. Now watch what that shape is telling you, because it's not random. The cushion is thinnest in the young years and biggest near the end. And it's the same instinct at both ends of a life. The young aren't failing, they're building, and everything is pulling at them at once. The old aren't hoarding. They've stopped chasing growth and started holding safety, cash they can reach on a Tuesday without selling a single thing. One room, 2 ends, the same human wish to not get caught short. Okay. I have to step out of the numbers for a second because I owe you the confession I promised. That $800 account I mentioned at the start? I once sat in a parking lot with a car that wouldn't turn over and did the exact math Carla did. And I remember the specific feeling, not that I was broke, but that I must be the only functioning adult in America with this little set aside. I built a far wall in my own head, stacked it with everyone I assumed had it together, and stood myself against it. And it turns out I was standing right around the middle of my age group the whole time. I wasn't behind the country. I was behind a story I made up. That story cost me more sleep than the car ever did. So, back to the room, because now I have to complicate your number the same way I did with net worth. Two people can have the exact same amount of cash and be living completely different lives. Here's why. The dollar in your account is only half the ruler. The other half is what that dollar buys. And what it buys is measured in time, in months. The standard target you've probably heard is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses sitting in cash. Just the essentials: rent or mortgage, food, insurance, the lights. Not the whole lifestyle, the survival version. So take that same $8,000. For a household that spends about $2,000 a month on essentials, $8,000 is 4 solid months of breathing room, a real cushion. But for a household spending $7,000 a month, that same $8,000 is barely 1 month. Same balance, same spot in the room. Completely different amount of safety. One of them can lose a job and stay calm for a season. The other is 1 bad month from the edge. That's the number that actually matters. Not how big the pile is, how long the pile lasts. And here's where the country really stands on that. About 46% of Americans have at least 3 months of expenses saved. And about 27%, better than 1 in 4, have 6 months or more. Which means if you can cover even 3 months of your own essentials, you are standing ahead of more than half the room. Not the mean, the room. So here's your homework, and it's one line. Take what you actually spend in a month on the essentials, just the must-pays, and multiply it by 3. That's your first real target, not a headline number, yours. Now I have to name one more thing, because for a lot of you it's the real story, and nobody says it out loud. Some people have a negative emergency fund. About 44% of Americans have more in emergency savings than they carry in credit card debt. Good. That's a cushion that's actually a cushion. But about 29%, nearly a third of the country, have more credit card debt than emergency savings. Think about what that means. $2,000 saved feels like a buffer, right up until you remember the $5,000 sitting on a card at 20-something%. That's not a cushion. That's a cushion that's underwater. On paper, you're below zero, and the card is quietly charging you rent every single month you don't look. If that's you, don't panic and don't pick one battle over the other. The move is a small starter buffer, even $1,000, so the next flat tire doesn't go back on the card, and then throw everything at the card. Build the tiny wall, then drain the swamp behind it. Both. In that order. And the last thing, which is really the whole point, because we just measured everybody, and I need you to hear where the fear actually comes from. About 60% of Americans say they feel uncomfortable with their level of emergency savings. 60%. And here's the part that matters. That number is way bigger than the number of people who are actually in trouble. Plenty of people who could pass every test we just ran still feel behind, which tells you the discomfort was never really measuring the account. It was measuring the account against the story. The neighbor who seems fine, the internet stranger with the perfect spreadsheet, the version of yourself you were supposed to be by now. That's the same crooked ruler from the net worth video. The enemy was never the balance, it was the comparison. So let's do the honest thing instead. Here's what to actually walk away with. Your emergency cash is a different number than your net worth, and it's the only one that shows up on a bad Tuesday, so measure it on its own. If you can cover a $400 surprise, you're already past more than a third of the country. If you can cover $1,000, you're past more than half. The middle household your age holds around $5,000 to $13,000 in cash, depending on age, and the average you keep hearing is nearly 8 times the truth. Ignore the average. Use the middle. The real target isn't a dollar, it's months. Take your monthly essentials, times 3, and that's your first goal. Get to 3 months, and you're ahead of most of the country. And if your card balance is bigger than your savings, build a small starter buffer first, then kill the card. In that order. Then automate one small transfer. Forget it's happening, and stop grading your whole life on the one Tuesday the check engine light picks to ruin. Carla closed her banking app that night. The $600 came out of savings, and it stung, and the account looked thinner afterward. But she also finally looked up her age bracket, something she'd never once done, and realized she'd been standing near the middle of her room the entire time, quietly convinced she was the only one at the door. She didn't feel rich, but for the first time, she stopped feeling doomed. And honestly, that's most of the battle. If nobody's ever shown you the honest room before, if every savings number you've ever measured yourself against turns out to have had a millionaire hiding inside it, then subscribe. That's the whole reason this channel exists. To hand you the ruler that isn't crooked. I'm Stan. Go find your number and then go find your months. I think you're standing further from that door than anyone ever told you. Before you go, here's the whole thing in one breath. Cash is the only money that shows up on a bad Tuesday. More than a third of Americans can't cover a $400 surprise, and more than half can't cover $1,000 from savings. The middle household holds only about $8,000 in cash, and it stays surprisingly flat right through the working years. So if you're sitting near that, you're not behind. You're standing right in the middle of the room. The real ruler isn't the dollar amount, it's the months it buys. Aim for 3 to 6 months of your essentials. Cover even 3, and you're already ahead of most of the country. Your balance is a snapshot, not a verdict. Build a small buffer, then kill the card. That's the whole game. If tonight made that number feel even a little less scary, do me a favor and subscribe. That's the whole reason this channel is here. One honest number at a time. No shame, no hype. Just the truth about where you actually stand. And I really do want to hear from you. Tell me down in the comments, what was the surprise bill that finally taught you to keep a little cash around? The mechanic, the vet, the tooth that picked the worst possible week. I read every single one. Keep a little cushion between you and the next bad Tuesday. I'll see you in the next one.